All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight for a conversation on respect in the digital world. This is the first of many really great events that are going on all week across both the United States and Canada in celebration of Media Literacy Week. Media Literacy Week actually has been celebrated in Canada for 10 years now, and has been a great inspiration for us in the United States to launch the inaugural Media Literacy Week here, and that effort is being led by the National Association for Media Literacy Education in the U.S., along with 118 national partners, and in Canada it has been led for the last 10 years by Media Smarts. So thank you everybody for joining us tonight for this great conversation, and as part of it, who is the head of global safety outreach for Twitter. Welcome, Patricia.
Thank you for having me. It's really great to be able to share what we're doing at Twitter for media literacy. So I really can't wait to get started with the conversation.
Welcome. And also Anthony Lycon, who is Director of Creative and Product Development for Fuel Entertainment.
Hello, thank you. Thank you for having me on.
Welcome. And in a moment, we'll also be joined by Lily Wyden, who is the Public Policy Manager for Instagram. So she'll be with us in a minute. So just to get us started, Patricia, can you talk a little bit about your role at Twitter?
Yes, absolutely. I work in our public policy team, but I have the great privilege to represent the teams that are working very hard behind the scenes to prevent abuse, but most importantly, to promote a safe environment online, not just on Twitter, but also outside of Twitter. And so in my role, I connect with expert organizations that are really the leading voices against abuse online, but also who teach us about how we can create tools in the platform that can be utilized by educators and families as well as young users. And I ensure that all of their feedback is captured and shared with our product safety team so that they can continue to innovate in the safety space, in the product, and also with the teams that are working to develop our policies in terms of what we allow in the platform, what we don't allow in the platform, and also how we can take action when things have gone wrong on Twitter.
Okay, great. It sounds like a big job.
It's that I love it.
Great. And Anthony, can you talk a little bit about your role with Fuel Entertainment?
Sure. So Fuel's a digital youth agency, so we work with anywhere between, for McDonald's and EU, we do a lot of stuff for the US, so with Warner Brothers, DreamWorks, National Geographic Kids, a host of different ones really focused on kids and teens and tweens. So we're really coming back to the whole idea of like how we're in compliance with all the different laws, how we're actually making sure we're doing like the best thing to protect kids, protect brands within this space. So it's a constantly moving target for us. Kids get older, younger, so they're all on platforms like Twitter and Instagram that we know. But we're still trying to have good, solid experiences and really represent the brands really well. So that's my role, is making sure everything is in compliance and kids are safe.
Okay, great. So I want to turn our conversation towards the topic, which is about respect in a digital world. And I think to give us a baseline to really dive into that conversation, Patricia, can you tell us, how would you describe the culture of the community on Twitter?
It's a great question, and I think it provides me with the opportunity to talk a little bit about what Twitter is like as a platform. And what you'll see on Twitter is that we're public, we are conversational, and we're widely distributed. When we say that we're public, what I mean is that the majority of our users are sharing content publicly with the world, as opposed to other social media sites that may have different privacy layers. Also, we're widely distributed and conversational. So for those of you who use Twitter, you will be familiar with hashtags, which are a great way to connect with people when you want to converse about specific topics of interest. So it could be something like a TV show that you're interested in. When you're watching it, you might see that hashtag on the screen. But it also could be global movements. Like, for instance, in France, when we saw the horrific terrorist attacks in January, we also immediately saw those hashtags, Je suis Charlie, by which the community really contributed to the global conversation. Because we are conversational, public, and widely distributed, as a platform, really our philosophy is to be as open as we can possibly be and as transparent as we can be. So what that really means is that we want to enable people to freely express their thoughts and ideas instantaneously and really around the world. That in turn means that the amount of content that we see in the platform is incredible. So we have about 320 million users that are contributing 1 billion tweets every 2 days. And just to put that in context, it took 3 years, 2 months, and 1 day to see the first billionth tweet. But now we're seeing so many conversations that we reached that 1 billion tweets every 2 days. So because we're open and transparent, we have to have rules. We see a lot of people coming together that have different points of view, different cultures. They're coming from different places around the world. And therefore, it's important to really set the boundaries and really explain what our rules are, what is allowed in the platform and what isn't allowed. Like, we're not the Wild West. Not everything goes. So it's important that those rules are clear to the public and they really set the expectation. And so what happens is we have those rules, and then we also have this incredible platform that provides people with an opportunity to discuss different topics and, most importantly, to come across content that they may not see in more traditional forms of media. So I think that's something that we're going to discuss a little bit later today, is what happens when you encounter points of view that perhaps you don't like, but at the same time, what happens when you encounter points of view that you may not have seen elsewhere and you want to participate in the conversations and contribute. And I think we can see that in that regard, Twitter is a really powerful tool to fight prejudices and to promote respect in the digital space.
Okay, great. Thank you. Anthony, I kind of want to give you an opportunity to talk about the properties that are, and the brands and the experience. I'm
actually losing you, Lynette. I don't know if anybody else has seen that.
By design. Okay, are you there? Sorry. So by design. Hi, sorry about that. So by design, in a gaming community, you are in fact pitting one person against another. They are in competition by design. So you know, can you talk a little bit about how you ensure that the community guidelines you've set for any gaming experiences you've been involved with, you know, currently or in the past, how do you ensure that even in the context of gaming, people are still maintaining a level of respect that is makes the experience good for each of your participants?
Sure, yeah. So the number one thing we want to make sure, especially with kids, is we want to make sure we're promoting smart and respectful behavior. You know, things especially, we want to try to leave parental, make sure that parents are okay with what the kids are doing, make sure that we're keeping them safe. So we put a lot of pieces in place. So one is sometimes we do registration so kids can speak more openly. But, you know, there are issues with that. Kids can't just go around and start sharing personal information with each other. And kids, you know, it's kind of difficult for them to understand, you know, on the other side. So we put different stop places in to make sure that everything is compliant. So what we do is we have stuff called whitelist chat that only allows the kids to say certain phrases or certain things. We don't allow open chat for most of our products that are actually focused for kids in certain regions. So in the U.S. it would be kids under the age of 13. So for that, we actually have moderators too. We check in there to make sure things that are being said. So there's this thing called dictionary dancing where kids are trying to say one thing by using other words that don't quite mean the same thing. So in one instance, the word beach, which sounds pretty innocent on its own, in a context, some kid might use it in some different context. So we try to go in there, we try to make sure that words are compliant with each other. So for us, it's constantly a battle because kids are pretty smart when we deal with that. So for us, it's really about trying to maintain the fun is what the kids are doing in the game, what's relevant within the game, trying to keep all the bad stuff to the side, but the horrible stuff doesn't happen as often as you think, but our whole philosophy is that one minute percentage that might actually, mess things up for everybody else, we're really trying to hold that down. So for us, we put a lot of instances in place to make sure, it's really, what's the fun part first, what's the games are all about, and then really trying to promote, what's smart, what's respectful around that for the community. So.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Lily, do we have you with us now?
Yes, I am so sorry about that. I was just having terrible unmuting problems.
Lily, I had introduced you earlier today, and if you could share with us a little bit about your role at Instagram.
Yeah, absolutely. So I work on the public policy team here at Instagram, specifically in a programs role, which we kind of look at as marketing for policy. So I work to develop partnerships and campaigns and projects with everyone from policy organizations to NGOs to just advocates and special interest groups. So really thankful and grateful to be here and to learn from all of you. And thank you again for putting up with me in my tech troubles.
Great, thank you. And since we have you now here, I wanted to give you also, Lily, an opportunity to talk a little bit about how you would actually describe the culture of the community on Instagram.
Sure, absolutely. So the cool thing about Instagram is it's really a global platform. Actually, more than 70% of our community is outside the US, so it's this really awesome global culture and environment. And I think what's really nice about Instagram is people come for discovery and for awareness and for learning about different pockets of the world through photos and videos. So it's really about visual storytelling and kind of discovery and self-expression, which makes for just like a really amazing culture.
Thank you. Patricia, you had actually alluded to this earlier, so thank you for teeing this question up. And it's around freedom of expression, especially when you have a platform that's so public, that's so global. So talk a little bit about how you help balance the right for people to express what they're feeling and what they believe with the need to uphold the guidelines of your community and the culture that you're hoping to engender.
Yeah, another great question. So what we hope through Twitter is that if you're following a diverse array of accounts, it can act as a discovery engine. So you're really going to be discovering content that you may not have otherwise found in other media, as I mentioned earlier. And so people tell their stories, and what we hope is that that creates that human connection. And when the human connection happens, it provokes a greater understanding, and it enhances communication in a way that we may not have seen before. That also leads to greater empathy. And so because we see people tweeting publicly, also we see users who are really empowered to tailor their experience. So let's say I'm interested in politics and football and literature. I will be following accounts that are tweeting about those things. There might be content that I don't want to see, and there's tools available to me to, again, tailor that experience. So I'll just give you one example. Let's say that I'm following my colleague Tom because I really like his tweets about politics. But then one day he starts tweeting about animal abuse because he has heard about a case that he's outraged about. I hate animal abuse and I don't want to be exposed to that type of content. So let's say he's shared a graphic image. He has his right to share that image, but I also have the right not to see it because I choose who I follow. By following people that you feel comfortable with, or notions, ideas that you feel comfortable with, you're immediately creating your experience. But if, let's say, some of those may be tweeting content that you may feel uncomfortable with, you can use different filters. So in the case of graphic content, we would ask that Tom marks his images as graphic, and then I mark my settings as not being exposed to that graphic content. So there's things that you can do to protect your experience. But then, of course, when things have gone wrong, we also want you to know what to do, because things might go wrong. Again, we have like a lot of diverse points of view, people coming from many different cultures, so what may not be offensive to you may be offensive to me. We want to make sure that people can express themselves freely, but you have the right to speak, but you don't have the right to scream at my face. So this is like very similar to what happens in the offline world, really. So when those situations happen, there's tools like mute, there's also tools like block. Let's say, I'll give you a great example. During the last World Cup, I was really upset when the Spanish football team lost, because I'm Spanish, but my colleagues in the French office thought it was fantastic, and they started tweeting about how much Spain sucked at football. And of course, they have the right to tweet those things. That is not a violation of our rules. I think you should, but it's not. Jokes aside, I do have a tool that is called Mute that enables me to not get notifications from some of those colleagues for a specific time frame. So for as long as the World Cup lasted, I wasn't getting those tweets that were offensive to me, not offensive to others. And then, of course, as soon as France lost in the World Cup, which was only a couple of weeks later, I started tweeting against France, and I'm sure that they also muted me or maybe even blocked me. So there's like these tools that we really want our users to be familiar with, and I think what's really fantastic about some of the groups that we're working with, including NAMLE, but also Connect Safely, the Family Online Safety Institute, etc., is that they allow us to reach the educators, the parents, the young users to learn more about the tools, because the tools exist, but at times it's hard for us to really get to the end user and like teach them about those tools. So we need to have fair rules. We try our best to have those rules, and those are public so that our users understand what is allowed in the platform and what isn't. We want the tweets to flow freely, but there has to be boundaries, and there's also tools that empower you to protect your experience when there may not have been a violation of the Twitter rules, but you may have felt uncomfortable about the content.
So are we to assume that there will be an update to the Twitter terms of service that you're not allowed to disparage the Spanish national football team? Just kidding about that, by the way.
If I ever become CEO, rest assured there will be one.
Okay, we will hold you to that. Okay, I want to shift the conversation a little bit, and Anthony, I wanted to ask you about your experiences with kids and gaming, but specifically about the role of parents in the way that they ensure that their kids are having positive experiences. One of the things that I hear a lot as I'm out in communities talking to parents and students is the concern that when you're playing a game with your friend, they're right next to you, you know them. But when you're playing a game in an online space, you may not know this person, and they may in fact not be who they say that they are. So can you talk a little bit about how you ensure that parents, first of all, feel that their kids are in fact existing in these online spaces and not have reasons to worry, and and also any examples of either through the products themselves or through your moderators to also ensure the same.
Yeah, so for us, I mean, it's constantly, especially in the beginning, we let kids know what the rules of engagement are, you know, how they're supposed to play, social features and community. So that's, since that is an important part of gaming. Within that, though, it's kind of an evolution. We always watch it. Like for us, it's something that's been a constant process, even throughout the years. Because again, kids do change of what communication is, how they communicate, what can be pursued as something else, you know, as the other person a kid, you know, as an adult posing as a kid. So for us, it's really focused on, again, like what the game is, what social features go in there are really well thought out beforehand. It's not something as an afterthought. A lot of stuff we do is pre-canned. So what we do is we try to get as close as we can as possible to have the core experiences in there, but we still want to limit creativity. So we're always going back there. We allow a lot of the users to send us feedback to how to make it better. I think one thing that's gotten easier, especially over the last 2 or 3 years, the whole advent of BuzzFeed with the emoticons of, like, you know, what you're feeling, and I know Facebook is doing that as well. Is the great thing is because that's just basically what your status is or what your emotion is at the time, and we've discovered that to be actually a really great thing, and you know, because it's safe, it's pretty safe, so we can control that. It doesn't allow the kids to fully, you know, not like Twitter where you can just enter what you're thinking at that moment. You can't do that with kids. You know, we are beholden to the parents, and we don't want to lose that trust. So for us, it's constantly making sure, you know, the kids are respectful. Our moderators are always watching. We're always hearing feedback. We have use cases in there that allows somebody to ignore a user or even report a user right away. Once somebody is reported, it goes immediately up to moderator. We can actually have the chat logs to review those. So again, we're a little bit more on the school safety side, but we need to make sure kids are safe. So that's our primary goal. You know, we want to keep things fun, but again, with everything, we got to make sure we balance it out. Because you know, once we lose the parents' trust, that's a huge issue. We can't do that. So it's a constant evolution. It's not like I can tell you this is what you do in a kit. It'll be perfect. We're always going back and reevaluating it. You know, especially with any social type of network, you have to see how people are using it. You know, you see that they're doing one type of thing, and you have to go back, and you still want creativity to happen, but you have to try to think different ways and different use cases. And there's always that small percentage who wants to ruin it for everybody else, and they always try to nerf the system. So we're always trying to. It's a constant battle, but you know, I think we do a pretty good job at it.
Great, thank you. Lily, are you still there? Do we have you? Still
here.
Hi. I had this great opportunity about 2 weeks ago to speak with a number of seniors in high school, and it was very interesting to hear about what they were doing with it, but mostly how they were deciding among themselves what was or wasn't okay. So I asked them the question, if somebody posts a photo that includes you and you don't really like how you look in it, what do you do? And their responses were everything from, if it's a good friend, I asked them to take it down, to, well, if everybody else looks good in it and I don't, well, I just let it go. So I want to open up this question actually to all of the panelists, but to start with you, what have you seen outside of the things that you do with community guidelines and reporting and features in Instagram, what have you seen the users themselves do to ensure that it's the kind of community they want it to be, to ensure that they're in fact upholding the value of respect on their own?
Yeah, that's a great question. Teens are obviously a huge cohort for us on Instagram, and it's been really, really interesting to see them create, you know, their own rules and their own kind of like vernacular even for like how they're communicating with each other. And I think what's been really interesting to me is seeing how, you know, teens and young people are actually bridging the online to offline relationship. So we've seen teens actually like meet up and like meet each other on Instagram, whether it's around a shared passion or cause or event, and then they actually meet in real life, which is really, really cool. They're actually called Insta-meets, and we've seen them around everything from bullying prevention to like Veterans Day and all kinds of like social good causes. And I think that's been a really nice way to, you know, develop this culture of like respect and tolerance and, you know, awareness of other people. But that said, I'm always learning from teens. It's kind of amazing. You know, and to go back to sort of the parents' question, you know, we no longer really live in that day and age of like all young people being on one or two apps. There's like tens or maybe hundreds of apps on any teen's phone. So trying to keep up with them is really hard. But just trying to like equip everyone, whether it's parents or educators or otherwise, with just the knowledge about how the app works, the tools and resources we have in place, and, you know, encouraging them to have, you know, a frank, open conversation with their students or children is super important, and then kind of relaying information that way about kind of like the culture and respect and the community that we want to have on Instagram.
Great. Thank you. Patricia, I'd like to also turn that question to you. Have you seen any examples of the community themselves taking a stand, taking action when they feel that there's someone in the community threatening a sense of peace, or if they see the beginnings of disrespect or unkindness? Can you talk about users and the action, any examples of things that they've done to take action before you do?
Yes, and I love this question because it gives me the opportunity to explain one of the reasons why I love working at Twitter so much and why I'm so passionate about this platform on a personal level. I feel very inspired very often by what our users are doing. I talked earlier about the open and public nature of the platform, which makes us very different to other social media sites. We also found that pseudonyms add a lot of value to our platform. If you look at the case of human rights activists, dissidents, etc., that are able to utilize this platform and communicate in a way that wouldn't have made it secure for them through other channels, it's really empowering. But when it comes to abuse, because of the open and public nature of this platform, what we have seen time and time again is the community reacting to abuse on Twitter, and that leading to radical changes in the mindset of people who may have been prejudiced otherwise. So I talked earlier about Yeshui Charlie. Another incredible movement is the I'll Ride With You movement. For those of you who are not familiar with it, you may remember the Sydney siege a couple of months ago when in downtown Sydney, terrorists took over a coffee shop, and there was a number of people that were trapped inside. And while the situation was resolved and none of the hostages were hurt, there was one lady who was at the time riding in public transport in Sydney, and she was wearing the veil. And one journalist who happened to be riding the same bus line realized that she was looking at her phone and following the situation closely, all of the news that were coming in, and she took off her veil because she felt that she would have been threatened when she stepped out of the public transport due to the situation that was ongoing and the way some people may equate Islam to terrorism, which is terrible, but it's something that was happening right there and then. And so this journalist wanted to reach out to her, and at the time didn't dare. So instead she went to Twitter and she tweeted that for anybody that at that time was using public transport and not feeling safe, she would ride with them. And all they had to do was tweet back at her with the hashtag I'll ride with you. And so as this situation is taking place, we're immediately, first, because we happening, we're following what's happening with the security situation, and we think we might see an increase in abuse reports coming from Australia. And instead, what we saw was this incredible wave of tweets that were extremely positive, and that would be what we call like counter narratives or counter speech, really just flowing through the platform. And it really was incredible. We even did like data analysis about how many tweets we were seeing per second. It was like a staggering amount. And that's just something that happens day in, day out. This is like a really great example, but I could give you daily examples where, you know, we see people who tweet very prejudiced views, and immediately the community reacts by saying, wait, what are you saying? You shouldn't be tweeting this way. Check out these resources, learn about what you're saying before you share your views in this very public way. And that's really what can lead to social change. We can take content down, but that's never really going to lead to changing mindsets and making the world a fairer and a safer place. So I think what really has surprised me, and something that really makes me proud of this platform, is how our users react to negative content by countering it, by sharing life-affirming perspectives that wouldn't have otherwise seen the light of day. And every now and then we do see those original Twitter users who were sharing those prejudiced views eventually changing their minds. We also see, you know, the community reacting to abuse. That's why we love to see bystander reports. We've said it time and time again. We don't want to place the burden on the victim. If you have received content, you know, like contact through Twitter that you think is abusive and offensive, you can rely on your community to report that content to us, and we'll take a look at the reports and take appropriate action when violations of the rules have taken place. So this happens on a very like global scale every single day, from the very small cases where I may be upset about something that I saw, and I will go to my community and ask them, how should I react to this, to the much bigger examples where we are leading to changing the mindset of somebody who may have been prejudiced otherwise. Sorry, yes,
Hello?
you do. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Sorry. I was experiencing some sound issues on my end.
Sorry, and
Can you hear me?
yeah, I can hear. Did you get, sorry, I know I was giving you a very long-winded answer because I'm really hired by our users, but let me know if you missed anything. I'm happy to repeat anything I said.
You know, I think I sort of caught up until mostly everything. It's very intern, and these are, you've actually named this behavior in your communities of people rising up where, you know, yes, you write community guidelines. I don't know how many people actually read them before they agree to use your services, but to see this as a trend, as a norm, and that you've actually seen it enough to give it a name, that definitely gives me hope for, as evidence that inherently people are behaving in a way that is respectful more often than not. So on that note, I actually just want to stop here for one moment and ask one other person to chime in here who is on the line, and this is actually the Director of Education for Media Smarts. Matthew Johnson, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Hello, yes, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
And I just wanted to give you an opportunity at this point, before we open it up to other people for questions, to talk a little bit about what you're doing in Canada to support this theme during Media Literacy Week, specifically around respect. So if you want to just tell us a little bit about what's been going on.
Sure. Well, as you mentioned earlier on, this is our 10th Media Literacy Week in Canada, and for most of those years we've had a different theme every year to cast a different light, a different emphasis on a different aspect of media or digital literacy. We really do consider them to be extensions of the same idea. So our theme this year is about respect. It's about encouraging young people in particular, of course, to treat others with respect, to treat themselves with respect when they're online, and also to respect property online. Because really what it comes down to is one of the biggest differences between digital media and traditional media is that interactive component, where we're participating as often as we're consuming media. And that adds a real ethical responsibility. It means that whether we're using other people's content, whether we're interacting with other people, whether we're sharing with other people, sharing other people's photos, we really do have a responsibility to respect one another. So that's our guiding theme, and every year we have more and more collaborators. We actually have almost 70 collaborators this year, ranging from really large corporations all the way down to public libraries, like individual branches of public libraries across the country, and everything in between. And they organize events, and we use the theme of the year as sort of a guiding principle, but we leave the details up to our collaborators. So a lot of times they'll use it as an opportunity to do really any kind of spotlight on media literacy, but obviously we particularly enjoy it when they're able to connect to our theme. So this year we had a launch earlier this week out in Calgary at the Museum of Human Rights, which was a workshop with a number of youth around that subject, where they really had an opportunity to explore the idea, and they had a chance to tell us what they think respect means in an online context.
Thank you. And actually, we're only halfway through the week, I think, right now. So if you could just quickly tell us where, if anyone is interested in still getting involved as an educator, as a parent, as anybody who wants to support raising awareness on media literacy in Canada, where might they go?
Well, our website is medialiteracyweek.ca.
Great.
And it has a collaborator package right there, and also a list of events, so you can find out if there's an event already happening near you. And if you're interested in participating this year, or if you're just thinking about participating next year, you can learn all about the event, its history, and how you can be a part of it.
Great. Thank you. And for anyone who either just joined us a little bit late or might just be joining now, in the United States, you can also see quite a bit of information about in the remaining days of Media Literacy Week, but even beyond this week. In the United States, it would be medialiteracyweek.us. Sorry about that. So at this time, I'd actually would like to open up questions to the panelists from others who are joining us on the Google Hangout. I have one more to get us started for each of our panelists, and it's related to this week in particular. As you know, it is the inaugural Media Literacy Week for the United States. It will be the hopefully, obviously, we will be celebrating it again a year from now. So, on your wish lists, the three of you, what would you like to see in terms of advancement in the areas of media literacy specific to the areas you're responsible for? So whether it be Twitter, Instagram, any of the Fuel entertainment properties, what would you like to see a year from now, either in terms of education, advancement, or the way that users are using your services. Lily, would you like to get us started?
Sure, that's a great question. I think, what we're seeing right now on Instagram is like, young people helping other young people, and I really would still love to see more of that. I think there's definitely something to be said for, speaking directly to parents and to educators, and really just kind of engaging teams amongst each other to help and educate and kind of like, foster the community and the respect that we want. I know that's really hard, and I'm not sure the best way to do it, but that's something that I'm super excited about that we're seeing on Instagram as is teams helping other teams, and how we can, equip them with the tools and resources to do more of that and to reach more people.
Anthony, can you hear us?
Oh, yes. No, hold on. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. For us, I think it's a bit tricky because our platforms are pretty closed. The nice thing, though, is especially in the last few years, and it's a pretty good growing trend, is a lot of kids aren't sharing as much real information about themselves, like real names, as personal identifying information. So we're seeing that as a good trend. I hope it continues. We have some theories around like millennial parents and their kids, and millennials really were about oversharing personal information, and it seems like there's a growing trend again not sharing personal information. So a lot of kids using more aliases, things around not around their real names or where they live and things around that. So I see that as a good growing trend because again, we're really worried about their safety. We just want to make sure those expectations are there that you can't just share everything, especially in that age range. So ours is very protected in that way. So pretty simple compared to the others.
Great. And Patricia, a year from now.
A year from now, and this is more a to-do list, I think, for us, I would love to see us more engaged with schools, with parents, with teenagers. Something that I think sometimes like the safety world forgets a little bit about is including those young users when we are developing policies, best practices. We have their well-being in mind, but oftentimes we forget to ask them about how they want to engage on these platforms, what they think is safe, what is unsafe. And so I would love to see some of those young users more and more engaged. Something that we've really liked at Twitter, working with young focus groups of young people and asking them directly, what do you think are the challenges that you're facing? What are the tools that you think you need? How do you feel about your privacy on Twitter? What help do you need from us? And actually, like just this year, we launched a safety center, and a big section of the safety center is dedicated for teenagers. But what I would love to see is that engagement with educators and parents as well, really to understand how are schools using Twitter, how can we help with media literacy and education, what are the main challenges. Sometimes there's a big digital divide with certain parents and educators who may not be super familiar with the technology. Twitter may seem like a simple platform, but we understand that it's at times complex to understand. And empowering the young users to have those regular conversations with the parents and the educators and their family members, I think is going to be key in bridging that digital divide. And so really working with groups like NAMLE, Media Smarts, and some of the other organizations that I mentioned earlier, Connect Safely, I Can Help, the helpline in the US, and just globally about how we can help bring Twitter to schools when it makes sense, and how we can make education fun and continue to create that safe environment that we want to foster. That's really what I would love to see. So I think this is more a very long list of to-do items for me and the team to figure out how we can best engage. We're a very small team, but we're very passionate. And I think with the help of expert organizations like the ones we have on the line today, we can really help bring media literacy to the forefront with our technology and others.
Great. We have a question from Michelle Lipkin, who is the executive director of NAMLE, and her question is, how would you? You've kind of answered this a little bit, Patricia, but how would you actually like to see educators using your platforms in the classroom if that's applicable? So, you know, Lily, let's give you an opportunity to talk about how would you like to see Instagram being used by educators in the classroom?
I would love, as Patricia said, I would love to do more with schools and educators as well. What's interesting about Instagram and Twitter, but I can't speak for Twitter, of course, is seeing how, you know, current and live events, you know, break on these platforms. So you can see what's happening live through photos and through videos and immediate commentary. And I would love to see educators and teachers kind of like capture that and engage with students as it's happening. You know, there's only so much that can be said and learned through textbooks, but learning in real time through some of these platforms as news and as history, you know, makes itself, I think is really powerful, and I would love to see teachers kind of, you know, engage with what's happening in real time on these platforms in the classroom.
Great. Thank you. Anthony, I don't know if there are applications of some of the products that you work on for the classroom. Does the opportunity exist for that to happen?
Not for the social platforms. We have done campaigns for like Google, like we did do one for Google a couple of years ago. That was a campaign about, you know, think before you actually post something, whatnot. But nothing in the social space. Again, like our platforms are pretty closed within that. So.
Okay. And again, I encourage anyone who's listening to our conversation right now to send us your questions for the panelists. I think on this note about teachers using any kind of technology in the classroom, I think personally as a parent and also as an educator in my professional life, what I see is a lot of fear and technology going hand in hand in many places that I go, and I think that the more that people are exposed to something, they fear what they don't know, and the more they understand how to use something and how something works, I think you start to see some of that anxiety and that fear go down a little bit. So, you know, I think it would be great to know that in a year from now, whatever it is you feel that you need to do to raise awareness about your platforms, to keep encouraging them as environments that do in fact support and encourage and enforce respect and a positive side of media for people of all ages, not just kids, is really would be a great accomplishment in a year's time, to see more teachers, like I said, talking about your tools in the classroom and using them in the classroom. I have another question here. What are your thoughts about, this is an interesting one, what are your thoughts about schools and districts blocking social media in the classrooms, social media use for the classroom use? I'll leave that to Patricia or Lily to take.
Yeah, I'll take a first stab at it, and then I'll let Lily join in too. So I understand why it happens, and actually, I had a very interesting conversation with Michelle from NAMLE recently about this. I mentioned earlier the digital divide, and I also mentioned how if you take Twitter, for instance, it's a product that may seem simple, but it can be quite complex in the way it works. I also understand how traditionally it may have seen as very disruptive, like it's used by teenagers. So yet another tool that they are using, whether it's when they're in the classroom, we're highly mobile, we were created for on mobile, and I understand how there can be a certain concern about how much time teenagers are spending online, watching TV, etc., rather than focusing on their tasks and so on. So I understand how traditionally we reached this point of blocking social media sites and certain websites in schools. I think though the way forward is to make these conversations regular. I remember now like the conversations I had with my parents when I was 16 about whether I should have a mobile phone or not. That's when mobile phones were becoming a more general resource, and they were very scared about whether I would use it safely, who was going to be able to contact me, etc. And I look back now, and I'm really proud of the fact that we had those conversations. They became something regular. I still felt that I had a certain level of privacy, but when I felt concerned about a specific text message or communication I had, I could consult with my parents. And if you look at the resources that the ISPs put together about 20 years ago, they are very similar to what we're doing right now on tech. So I feel like these are challenges that we have faced throughout history, whether it was the invention of TV, radio, etc., Telegram at first, and the social media platforms now. What's very important is to demystify these conversations. I feel like now, as an educator or as a family member that may have like young children in your family, this should be part of a regular conversation. The same way that you're going to teach them not to cross the street when there's a red light, there should be regular conversations about how to set your privacy online, what to share and not to share. You know, your traditional pieces of advice, like think before you post, think about the digital trail that you're leaving behind, etc. That's really how we're going to become responsible digital citizens. And I look at the way some schools are using Twitter. It's important to note that you have to be 13 to be on Twitter, but we have seen educators who use Twitter to connect with parents. Rather than connect with the students. We've also seen some schools that are using Twitter and ask their students to tweet how the Civil War was or how the French Revolution was. And we immediately hear about how the engagement rate in the classroom goes through the roof because the kids find that a very engaging way of learning. And of course, the 140 characters force you to be very concise and precise about what you're saying. So I understand the schools that may have blocked this technology. I think the way forward is to engage in a constructive dialogue. I mentioned before, I mean, I would love to engage more with schools to understand what challenges they are facing. Similarly, with educators who may feel that our tools are too complex or maybe Twitter is not a safe environment, because by having those regular conversations, we can get to that empowerment piece I mentioned earlier, like what are the tools available to our users to create that safe environment. And we will only have a safe environment if all of us come together. You know, like safety really is a shared responsibility. So I want to hear from those schools. I also want to hear from the schools that are using Twitter well. That's why I'm so excited about connecting with NAMLE Media Smarts in Canada and some of the other groups to really understand how can we help. Well, like, we are here to help. We want to hear about the needs and the challenges that educators, parents, and young users are facing. We are ready to engage in those conversations and share our the learnings that we have done over the last few years and see how we can take it on moving forward.
So Lily, I don't know if you would like to comment on you know, schools actually blocking access to Instagram, and this is not necessarily just the rule of you can't have that you can't have technology. I mean, you can't have access to any cell phone during school hours. This is specifically not allowed to use Instagram. Lily, can you hear me?
Yeah, it's just breaking out a little bit.
Okay. Sorry about that. I'll repeat the question. What do you feel about schools that are actually blocking access to Instagram, not just for personal use, but also any teachers who are really trying to push the edges of, creative ways to educate kids and use Instagram as a teaching tool?
Yeah, that's a great question. I work with high school students in a number of capacities, and I've seen that exact situation where their schools have blocked. And I totally understand that, some of these platforms are distracting and there's lots of, fun kind of, inspiring content that may not be best suited, for kind of like the daytime school time hours. That said, I think, the net gain of what you get from some of these platforms is greater than the risk, I guess I should say. The exposure to what's happening in the world, around the world at any given time is really, really powerful. And I think, you can also, customize your settings and kind of customize, how these kids are kind of like looking at the lens of the world through these platforms. And there's just so much to see and be exposed to. But as Patricia said, we want to be a resource and be helpful and understand like how we can make this work and how we can have kids and students using technology and these platforms in the classroom that makes most sense for them, that makes most sense for the educators, it makes most sense for parents. And I just would reiterate sort of her point that it kind of just takes a lot of open dialogue and kind of understanding what everyone's needs are, and there's definitely a lot of work that we can do there. But I think that there's so much to work on and to learn and to be exposed to.
On this note of people having visceral negative reactions to technology, and Anthony, there's still people out there who say, oh, gaming. My son being one, but although I'm not anti-gaming for him, but I know a lot of parents who worry that their kids are just on screens all the time and not outside running around. Instead, they're in these online gaming, spending a lot of time doing gaming with each other. So, what do you do? What do you say to sort of not just demystify, but take away the demonization of online gaming? What would be your message about the benefits of it for kids? Because it feels sometimes like it's always about the bad side of gaming.
Yeah, I think that kind of runs together with like console games, mobile especially, because kids spend so much time on mobile phones, on social and games. For us, it's really about the plus sizes, or to those, like the big pluses are basically learning within it. There's a lot of stuff that we do around education, reading, the cognizant thought, especially too for a lot of younger kids. We do a lot of stuff that's really in tune to like what they're learning in schools. So we try to do a lot of that. We do encourage on some products like kids to get out, go do stuff, go see what their yards look like. But that's tough because, again, a lot of parents use like mobile phones and tablets as kind of babysitters, that's what they've kind of become. A lot of kids spend a lot of time on these things. So it's tough for us. We're really writing a line. We do stuff in there where we look at the analytics to make sure that what a play session is. So we know our averages, but kids go in and out between our experiences and other experiences because you can go in and out of things on the mobile phone or tablet so quickly. So it's just not us. It's kind of everybody. It's this endless buffet of content and things to kind of get engaged in. So they might go on Twitter, they might go on Instagram, they might go on other games, but they're doing everything all within, an hour or so, or even a couple of minutes. So for us, it's constantly moving of, trying to, get to parents. We do a lot of focus group testing. We do a lot of usability testing. We understand that. We hear the needs from parents, what they want us to do, but for us, it's really just constantly trying to educate them of, you know, this is what behavior is, this is what gaming is, this is what kids can do. But we have put some stop gaps in place, so we allow parents to control how much time they spend in games, other things as well. And, you know, we do have those options. The hard part is you might have that, but parents don't use it. You know, it's like a good to have. It's like, oh, that's great, you have all this stuff. But, you know, in reality, a lot of parents don't use it. It's really hard, and we can't force somebody to do that. We can't force, like, you know, a parent to go through those stop gaps. So it's really hard. It's a tough game to play.
Okay. So, I mean, on that note, I want to direct a question to Matthew in Canada about something that Anthony just mentioned, which is about setting limits and maybe some of the technology tools that are available for parents, particularly of younger kids, to set some of those limits. Your thoughts on that?
Sure. Well, you know, we actually, one of the things we do is research with Canadian kids, Canadian parents, and Canadian teachers. And what we've really found, in fact, is that, you know, although technological tools are helpful with younger kids, what really makes a difference in kids' behavior is whether or not there are rules in the house about how they should behave online. And that's a really important thing for parents to know, because, you know, I have kids. They're not, my kids aren't teenagers yet, but I know how parents feel that, especially when it comes to technology, it feels like what they're saying goes in one ear and out the other. But it's important for them to know that our research strongly shows that having rules in the house, really communicating your values to your kids about how you expect them to behave, that you expect them to treat other people and themselves with respect, really does seem to make a difference in their behavior. And, you know, when it comes to teachers, as I said, we've done some research there as well, and what they told us loud and clear was, in many cases, they want to be using social networking platforms and other online tools like online video sites. They recognize that these are tremendous resources, and also how engaging they are for young people. What they want to have is more autonomy. They want to be able to choose when to essentially turn on and off access to these sites, so that they can use them when it's educationally appropriate and turn them off if they feel the kids are not using them appropriately, or if it's not the right time. And they also recognize, just like the kids we've studied recognize, that they need more support and more training in how to use these technologies effectively.
And I think that's a great note to kind of wrap our conversation around. You know, Lily early on talked about the merging of the online and offline relationships, and how that's really starting to dictate what you're seeing on those online platforms that you all work on a daily basis. But that what you're saying here, Matthew, is that it really starts with how we are with each other before we ever pick up a device. And I think maybe on that note, the topic of this discussion was actually about respect in the world, not the digital world, because perhaps there really isn't a whole lot of difference. If we, in fact, want to ensure that people of any ages are treating each other with respect, that we need to be doing it everywhere, not just when they're online. So we're at the top of the hour, a little past the top of the hour. I really want to thank all of our panelists tonight. Patricia Cartez from Twitter, Lily Wyden from Instagram, Anthony Lycan from Fuel Entertainment, Matthew Johnson from Media Smarts. I want to thank NAMLE and all of the supporters of both NAMLE and Media Smarts during Media Literacy Week, everybody that joined us tonight. Thank you so much for your time. I look forward to continuing this conversation perhaps a year from now, since we all did have our wish lists and made it very public, by the way. So with that, I we'll end the call here. But again, thank you so much. And if you are interested in still using the remaining 2 days of this week to celebrate Media Literacy Week in Canada or in the United States, please go to medialiteracy.ca or medialiteracyweek.ca or medialiteracyweek.us. Thank you.